Hi, everyone. Welcome to week 8. Can you believe it? After today, we are 2/3 of the way done with this class. I'm so excited for us to have gotten this far and to keep going. This week, we're going to focus on the family system. So I want to ask if there are any victories. If we were in class, we would take a moment and share them with each other, but I still want us to practice going through this process of recognizing victories. I know a lot of kids are ending the school year right now, so maybe we were able to successfully complete out the rest of the schoolwork with our kids. Maybe we had graduations. Maybe my child was able to go overnight without going to the bathroom in their bed, or maybe they had worked really hard to complete their chores diligently this week. Whatever it is, take a minute and recognize that and celebrate that with yourself. What parenting techniques have we been working on? This would be another check-in question. Maybe some of us are working on communication. Maybe some of us are working on playing with our children. Maybe some of us are working on putting down our cell phones when somebody is talking to us. I also love hearing if there's anything that people are planning on trying. Hopefully you'll check in with us this Thursday on Zoom and you can share some of these with us. So if I were to write a learning goal today, one idea could be, I would like to become more aware of the role I play in our family system and how it affects others. Some takeaway messages that we're going to be focusing on this week are: family is more than a collection of members. It is a unique system within which family members are interdependent with each other and play various roles. Stepping back and taking a look at how things are going in your family system changes the entire system. Another learning goal could be, I would like to identify a value system for my family. This is something we're going to go through a little bit later. Takeaway message with this is, parents can build goals to close the gap between their current circumstances and their parenting values. Parents can utilize goal setting to put their values into action in order to fulfill the vision they have for their children. So maybe one of these learning goals speaks to you. Maybe neither of them do, and you have something different you're working on. Go ahead and do what feels best for you. So we want to think of the family as a system. Sometimes we as parents think that that we're able to completely shelter our children from stressors that we may be going through, or we sometimes think that we are so in control of ourselves and all of our emotions that we are able to keep difficult things that we are going through from impacting our kids. But we really want to think of our family system as instead this connected web, where when one person moves or flexes, everybody else is also going to have some sort of response. I want you to take a minute and close your eyes and picture children standing in a circle holding hands with each other. Let's say we have 5 children holding hands in this circle. Now, if one jumps up and down, are the other children that are holding their hand going to also be impacted by that movement? Absolutely. Their hands are going to go up and down. They maybe even become unstable when they're jumping up and down like that. maybe one of the children falls. Are the other people going to also experience some sort of impact from that? Absolutely they are. It could be that the whole circle topples down entirely. It could be that one falls and the other two have to brace themselves and stabilize and pull the fallen child back up. But that's how we want to think of our family, is that we are a circle of people holding hands, that every movement one of us makes, the others are going to be impacted by in some way. People in a family play certain roles to keep a family going. This keeps the family system going, but not always in a positive way. So this is going to be a central point that we're going to continue to focus on over and over. No matter if our practices in our family are healthy or unhealthy, we are all playing a role that keeps that either healthiness or unhealthiness to continue to exist. So I want to go over some vocabulary that is different with this lesson. So in this lesson, when we talk about the abuser, this means something different than how I had used the word abuser in the past. So in the past, when I would hear the word abuser, I would think of somebody that punches someone in the face and gives them a black eye, for instance. That is one example of an abuser, but what we really want to think about in this during this lesson is that the abuser is somebody who is abusing their role as a parent. So again, they are abusing their role. So that could be through physical harm, like I described. It could be through these other examples listed here, such as substance abuse, criminality, domestic violence, emotional abuse, or psychological abuse. So the parent's role is to provide a safe and loving place for or childhood for their children, and that's going to include home and health and all the different experiences or places, I guess I should say, that our children and family exist within. That's the parent's role to do that. It's also the parent's role to know what is an appropriate expectation for their children. It's also the parent's role to guide their children and not to expect their children to fulfill roles for the parent. I hope that is making sense. This one's a little harder to teach on video. So we want to think of the abuser as someone who is not doing their parent job effectively because of the abusive behavior they are engaged with. And so let's say, for instance, that I'm a parent that is in my addiction, and I am continuing to use substances. That is one example of how I'm abusing my role as a parent, because when I'm using those substances, I'm not able to make the correct priorities that I need to, and that is a healthy and happy home for my children. Instead, I may do other things. Maybe I'm going to lose my job. And then I can't pay for our home and our food and everything else. And that would be one example of how I am having an impact on the rest of my family, the rest of that family system. Sometimes I may convince myself that I can keep my addiction hidden and they won't know about it. And I can just be functioning and no one will be aware. But all of us that have had experience with addiction, whether ourselves or with people we love, know that that's not true and that's not how it works. At some point, it's going to, the two worlds are going to collide and the consequences are going to be dire. I'm not going to be able to shelter my children from it. So it's my job as a parent to get myself treatment or to get myself help or to put my children in a situation where they are not having to experience the consequences of me being active in my addiction. Otherwise, I am abusing that role as a parent. I hope that that makes sense. So all the things that the abuser does that keeps themselves abusing has an impact on everybody else in the system. And it's going to be primarily all negative impacts on the rest of the family. If I am unable to take care of my other children because I am in my addiction, active in my addiction, and I am relying on the children to be providing for themselves and creating the structure for themselves and making sure that their homework's getting done and their dinner's getting made by themselves without my oversight. Again, I'm having impacts on the rest of the members of my family, and that is me abusing my role as a parent. I hope that makes sense. If you have questions, please let us know. So how I said before that everybody in the family, whether the system is healthy or unhealthy, plays a role that keeps that current state going. We're going to define some of the other roles that we see. So another role is a caretaker. The caretaker feels like they have to keep the family going. Over and over, they take on the addict's or abuser's problems and responsibilities. The caretaker protects and takes care of the problem parent so that the parent is never allowed to experience negative consequences of his or her actions. The caretaker feels he or she must act this way because otherwise the family may not survive. Some examples of these behaviors that a caretaker may be enabling could be, for instance, mental illness. It doesn't mean somebody that the other parent has a diagnosis. It means somebody that is not getting treatment for their diagnosis. And it's having negative impacts on the rest of the family. That caretaker, whether it's the co-parent or maybe it's even the oldest child. Some of us have known families where the oldest sister or brother ends up being more of the parent and doing a lot of that caretaking. When they're fulfilling that role to keep that family going, even though it's an unhealthy system that's happening. Another example, we've talked about substance abuse, medical disability. So again, it's not saying that anybody with a medical disability is an abuser and anybody involved is enabling it to happen. It's when the system, the family system, is unhealthy because the structure that it's around isn't enough to give everybody in the family what they need. And this is a hard concept. It's going to be different family to family. There's lots of families where people have a medical disability within that family, and we're still able to function in a healthy way. And that's ideal and perfectly fine. However, sometimes there are situations where there's maybe an untreated medical disability, or maybe a medical disability that requires more treatment than what is currently being given. For instance, maybe I need a caretaker because I have a medical disability, and I am relying on my 15-year-old child to be that caretaker for me. And now they're struggling in school, or maybe not going to school, or going late in order to fulfill the other duties. This is creating a situation in which the system is not functioning in a healthy way. And it's forcing everybody to play these different roles to keep us going, but not going in the way that's best for our children. Now, I just want to make clear that I don't think anybody does these things with anything besides good intent. I think that we as humans and as family members, we kind of step up and do what we need to do to take care of things. And it can be really, really hard to recognize when something is beyond our control, or when something's having a negative, unhealthy impact on the entire system. So the intent here is not to necessarily define all the ways that things could be unhealthy. Instead, it's to teach about the different trends that we see in different family systems, so that you can think about how that relates to your life and your family. I hope that makes sense. It's, again, hard to teach it in this way. So another role that family members play is called the hero. So this family member devotes his or her time and attention to making the family look normal and without problems. The hero can mask or make up for the dysfunctional home life. The parents look to this child to prove that they are good parents and good people. While the hero saves the family by being perfect and making it look good, the child may struggle to live up to this status. The hero's compulsive drive to succeed may in turn lead to stress-related illness and compulsive overworking. One example of a hero I can think of from my childhood is a child in the family that is, let's say, a sports star, the football star. They work really, really hard to be the best they can absolutely be. And the role that they're playing in that family system, in that unhealthy system, is it's validating that there is nothing wrong and everything's okay here. Because if there was a problem, how could such a marvelous child, marvelous football star, whatever it is they're the hero in, be so phenomenal? Of course there's nothing unhealthy going on there. The scapegoat. The scapegoat is the problem child or the troublemaker. This family member always seems defiant, hostile, and angry. The scapegoat usually has trouble in school because they get attention the only way they know how, which is negatively. This individual's behavior warrants negative attention and is a great distraction for everyone from the real issues at hand. Almost every television show about a family has a child that is really represented as a scapegoat. One of the most most obvious examples in my mind is Bart Simpson, if any of us are familiar with The Simpsons. He's very much portrayed as as the scapegoat, this problem child. He's just such trouble. And I really challenge you to recognize that there are no kids that are problem children. There are no kids that are just troublemakers. Bart was not just innately born to be bad or bothersome to others. If we think about his family system, we can very easily identify that his father is abusing his role as a parent because he is very much devoted, very much succumbed to his addiction with alcohol. And it has a lot of negative consequences. He's angry, he is unpredictable, he is often quitting or losing his job or spending all the money or crashing his car or not coming home. He causes a lot of chaos and disruption. And he's abusing that role because he's putting the needs of everyone else in that system below his prerogative to keep his unhealthy behavior continuing. The lost child. The lost child is usually known as the quiet one. They can sometimes be the invisible child. They try to escape the family situation by making themselves very small and quiet. They stay out of the way of problems and spend a lot of time alone. This child avoids interactions with other family members and basically disappears. They become loners or are very shy. This child seeks the privacy of his or her own company and to be away from the family chaos. Next is the mascot. This role is for the sole purpose of providing levity and lightness to the family. This may look like a class clown. The laughter masks the pain and the reality of the abusive behavior. I want us to think about how these roles also have impacts on the children that are playing these roles. So for instance, this mascot that is, I might also call like the class clown, what type of impact does that have on that child? When I think of the people that I have seen play this role, the mascot or the class clown, there's very much this expectation that they are always silly, they are always on, they are always being a comedian, and people tend to not take them as seriously when they are trying to not be that specific role. And so it creates this expectation that they are to always be filling this and aren't able to be human and just have feelings like the rest of us. Another version of this is a translator. This person helps the family relate with the outside world. They may also help family members relate to one another. So, with all of those roles being identified, I want us to recognize a couple things. Sometimes when I talk about these different roles, I get feedback from parents saying, well, what you're describing is, or what you're expecting families to be, are the families on TV with a white picket fence and everything just being exactly hunky-dory, and my family is never going to look like that, and we're different. We don't fit that mold. And I really challenge that idea because actually that's not accurate. There are endless ways for a family system to be healthy. Again, there are endless ways for a family system to be healthy. However, there are only a few ways for a family to be unhealthy, or I should say there are trends that unhealthy family systems tend to share. And so we're going to go through these dysfunctional family patterns, these dysfunctional trends that can help us align, help us figure out where our family is, or where it is we want them to be. So one trend of dysfunctional family systems is inconsistency and unpredictability. Parents have no solid pattern in disciplining a child or dealing with stress. These types of parents are frightening to children because they never know what to expect. So just like I was talking about with Bart Simpson a few minutes ago, he does not know if when dad comes home tonight, he's going to be angry and strangle him, or if he's going to be super fun and give him a whole bunch of donuts at midnight. He has no idea what it is to expect, and so he is either on eggshells because he's always nervous, or he is confused and upset and scared and fearful when the very angry wrath of punishment comes down. Our children need consistency, and they need predictability. They need that in our actions and in our expectations. Role reversals. The parents act like kids, so the kids have to act like parents. Parents may be so immature and irresponsible that their children never know what to expect. Closed family system. Outsiders are feared and parents discourage relationships with others. This breaks off the process of normal socialization and friendship important in childhood development. Lack of empathy. Feelings are not validated. If you cry, you are told not to cry. If you are sad, you are told not to be sad. Feelings are deemed unacceptable, so children try to avoid all types of feelings. Mixed messages. Parents may tell their children not to lie. However, they lie when making excuses to their boss or in other situations. Parents may punish children for stealing, while parents steal from stores or each other. Children may be punished for drinking or smoking, while parents drink and smoke in front of the children. Withholding. Love may be withheld based on a child's behavior. Parents may withhold praise, attention, or money as well in appropriate ways. This conditional love as well in inappropriate ways. I apologize for that. This conditional love confuses children and makes them feel unloved or unimportant. Sometimes I teach this lesson and I have parents that are just, they're feeling really guilty or really low. And I think that it's important that, again, we recognize that there's a few different factors involved in figuring out whether our family system is healthy or unhealthy. I'll give you an example. I'll tell you a story of a mother I met when I taught this a few years ago. This mother was a single mother. She had 6 children. And she worked at the post office with pretty inconsistent hours. It was a good job, and she needed the job in order to provide for her 6 children. But unfortunately, that required her to very much lean on her high school age daughter for after school childcare. Having to take on more responsibilities than maybe what other 14-year-olds have to take on. after I taught this lesson, that mother had asked me, if she was, what she was to do. She had no other option besides relying on her high school age daughter to provide childcare. She couldn't afford childcare for 5 kids 5 days a week. That wasn't an option. She also very much needed this job. She also very much loved her children and wanted to have a healthy dynamic. Something that we talked about together was that different families have different obligations. For instance, my family that lives on a farm is going to have different responsibilities or obligations in order for our family to survive than my brother's family that lives in an apartment. That's just a fact of life. Children that come from a big family are probably going to have more responsibilities or obligations in childcare and managing stuff for their younger siblings, driving them to and from school or sports or whatever, than a single child. That's just kind of a fact of life, and that different families have different responsibilities and obligations. So it's not shocking that she would have to rely on her high school age child in order to in order to have that child care. However, she also recognizes that her child is 14 and needs some time to be 14 as well. And so something that I had coached her in was, I said, well, what's something that is really important to her? Well, this child in particular loved cheerleading, and she was on the cheerleading team, and it was really important to her that she could participate in that. Well, at this particular school, cheerleading happened on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and not on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. And so I said, okay, well, could we get childcare for the siblings on Tuesdays and Thursdays so that kiddo can still go to that cheerleading practice, and that be very important that we do that, and make that very sacred, with the deal of she can do the after school bus pickup on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays. So again, it's important that we recognize that different families have different obligations and different expectations in order to survive, and that in and of itself doesn't make it unhealthy or dysfunctional. But to expect the 14-year-old to give up everything about being 14 would make it dysfunctional or unhealthy. Another example would be, let's say that this 14-year-old wasn't mature enough to provide safe supervision for her siblings. Maybe she doesn't know how to take care of them safely. Maybe she doesn't know how to respond to dangerous or emergency situations correctly. Or maybe she's mean to her siblings and hits them or yells and screams and calls them names. If any of those cases were true, then again, we would have to find an alternative solution, because that also would be unhealthy, and create an unhealthy family system, that this child is not mature enough or capable of providing what you're expecting her to, but she still has to. So in PIO, we learn a lot of tools for change. In families where there are clear barriers to being an effective parent, a child might take on a role that helps the family survive. These roles often require the child to take on adult responsibilities for which they are not prepared and they may not be equipped to handle, such as raising their siblings. In contrast, in families where there are no huge barriers and the adult is able to get to the majority of the parent job, get the majority of the parent job done, children can be freed from limiting roles. So what are some tools for change we can use to help us do our parent job? Well, we cover them every single week. If we start from the very beginning, we can have a vision for where we want our children to go along that pathway of destination adulthood. We can practice positive communication, active listening, problem-solving skills. We can practice playing with our children, solving play problems, reading with our children. We can know appropriate child development, know what the children's jobs are and the parents' matching jobs for each child are. We can have an understanding of brain development and make activity choices or parenting choices that are going to promote those different areas of brain development. We can build a family identity. We can practice family meetings. We can parent our children as individuals. We can properly intervene during sibling rivalry and children's fights. We can know love languages and make sure that when we are expressing love with our children, that it's in the language that they understand. We can know what their temperament is and figure out what skills to teach, knowing that temperament style. So there's lots of things that we can do to address the unhealthy family systems that we may find ourselves within. And I don't think anybody is free of never being in an unhealthy family system, or maybe I should say no family ever goes through hills and valleys. There's times where things are going good, and then there's times when maybe these really monumental things happened. And maybe outside of my control, I wasn't at fault for it. It just kind of happened, and it's put us in this unhealthy dynamic. It's not my fault when unexpected things happen, but it is my obligation and responsibility to flex and change and shift and recognize what it is that's needed or what it is that's unhealthy in order to get us into a better path. And often that is definitely going to be relying on or leaning on or asking for help or a hand up or just a hand to hold from others, often outside of that family unit. When we just insulate ourselves, it's going to close us off. So I know this was a long time that I've been talking. I hope that this makes sense. I hope that this is clear and landing well. It's difficult to put this into a recorded video, but I hope it's making sense. If you're confused, please feel free to reach out. Thank you.